Realizing that philosophy's approaches lead to wisdom and truth is essential. Without a doubt, philosophy is important and useful since it fosters critical thinking. Philosophical techniques significantly help people in finding wisdom and the truth. The how of philosophical practice is the main focus of philosophical methods. They recommend basic steps to facilitate in dealing with philosophical issues. Good morning and mabuhay to all. Today's discourse will center on the approaches to philosophy that well-known philosophers have developed and used. There are numerous ways to approach philosophy, but for the sake of this lesson, the Socratic method, phenomenological method, analytic method, methodic doubt, dialectical method, and critical method will be tackled. Before venturing into the discussion of the lesson, it will be a great help to establish guide questions to facilitate understanding of the lesson. As such, here are the questions. 1. How do the methods of philosophizing facilitate the solving of philosophical problems? 2. How do the methods of philosophizing lead to wisdom and truth? After the discussion of the lesson, answer those questions to evaluate the extent of your learning. The Socratic method is a didactic dialogue of questioning that is expressed in the critical examination and cross-examination of the positions of every participant in the dialogue. However, it is important to note that this method is simply a way to discover the truth. Hence, the Socratic method is neither a rhetoric or the art of persuasion nor a debate in which participants in a dialogue, discourse or discussion prove their position. For this reason, those who are involved in a dialogue do not attempt to persuade the other or debate with each other, but work together in order to discover the truth. The didactic dialogue of Socrates intends not to convey new truth but only as a guide in arriving at the truth. Socrates calls this method metotic or intellectual midwifery. It is worth noting, however, that the participants in the dialogue must first admit their ignorance. This is because, for Socrates, knowledge begins the moment one admits his or her ignorance, that is, when one realizes that he/she does not know. Thus the famous Socratic dictum, know thyself. For sure, it is when we admit that we do not know, that there is so much to know that the more we know, the more that we do not know, that we begin to seek the truth and acquire wisdom. Applied in a classroom setting, the teacher does not seek to inculcate the students with knowledge or truths. On the contrary, the teacher simply acts as a guide in arriving at certain truths. Thus, in this method, the students are no longer viewed as passive recipients of knowledge, but as an active agent in the acquisition of knowledge. Here, the students think for themselves and the Socratic teacher only facilitates the discussion. More importantly, the Socratic method is a way of thinking that involves three important steps in arriving at the truth. In the first step, we give an initial definition of a thing or a concept. For example, we say, freedom is the ability of the human person to do whatever she wants to do. In the second step, we look for those characteristics of freedom that are not captured in the initial definition. For example, we may ask the question, can I attack anybody because I am free to do anything I want to do? Reality, you cannot attack, simply you desire it and you can do it. This will lead us to the third step, where we give additional or a new definition of a freedom. Thus, we may say, freedom is doing anything we want to do as long as we do not cross others' freedom. If we repeat this process, then eventually we can come up with a true definition of freedom. Indeed, with the Socratic method, we are able to improve our understanding of something and eventually arrive at the truth. For sure, with the Socratic method, an individual is able to move from the state of not knowing to that of knowing. Phenomenology comes from the two Greek words phenomenon, which means appearance, and logos, which means reason or study. Hence, etymologically speaking, phenomenology means study of phenomenon. The term phenomenon means anything that exists of which the mind is conscious. A book is a concrete example of a phenomenon. A book is there existing materially, and the mind is conscious of it. However, phenomenology is formally defined as the investigation of the essence or the nature of material things or things that appear to us. Phenomenology, in general, is identified with the rigorous study of our conscious experience. It deals primarily with the determination of the nature and structure of human conscious experience, which may come in the following guises, namely, the experiences of perceiving, listening, looking, remembering, feeling, acting, and so on. Significantly, phenomenology as a philosophy and a method of inquiry is not limited to an approach to knowing. It is rather an intellectual engagement in interpretations and meaning-making that is used to understand the lived world of human beings at a conscious level. The following are the fundamental considerations in doing phenomenology. 1. Observing the lived experiences. Husserl contended that a lived experience of a phenomenon had perceived features that were commonly perceived by individuals who had experienced the phenomenon. These commonly perceived features or universal essences can be identified to develop a generalizable description. The essences of a phenomenon, according to Husserl, represented is the true nature of that phenomenon. In order to focus on the lived experience, thus capturing the universal essences of the phenomenon, one must suspend his or her own attitudes, beliefs, and suppositions. That is, he or she is just an observer taking to note the lived experience as described by the one who experienced the phenomenon. 2. Phenomenological reduction. The captured universal essences are subjected to series of reduction processes. The first reduction, referred to as the transcendental stage, requires transcendence from the natural attitude of everyday life through epoche, also called the process of bracketing. This is the process through which the researchers set aside or bracket off previous understandings, past knowledge, and assumptions about the phenomenon of interest. In the second phase, transcendental phenomenological reduction, each participant's experience is considered individually and a complete description of the phenomenon's meanings and essences is constructed. Next is reduction via imaginative variation, wherein all the participants' descriptions of conscious experience are distilled to a unified synthesis of essences through the process of free variation. This process relies on intuition and requires imagining multiple variations of the phenomenon in order to arrive at the essences of the phenomenon. These essences become the foundation for all knowledge about the phenomenon. 3. Validation of the filtered essences. Other methods of triangulation are utilized to the reduced essences to confirm appropriate bracketing. Alternatively, a study could involve validation of data via member checking to ensure that the identified essences resonated with the participants' experiences. Analytic philosophy is a loosely related set of approaches to philosophical problems, dominant in Anglo-American philosophy from the early 20th century, which emphasizes the study of the logical analysis of concepts. This method of philosophizing is focused more on the use of the process of logic and rational discourse than on the subject itself. It considers the search for truth through scientific process. Its nature is closely related to logical positivism, rigid adherence to the scientific method, the belief in external world structure. The fundamental of analytic philosophy is based on the belief that a statement is meaningful only if it is proven true or false through experimentation. Logic is one of the philosophical methods that embraces analytic philosophy in addressing philosophical problems. Logic is the truth based on reasoning and critical thinking. It includes analysis and construction of arguments. It serves as path to freedom from half-truths and deception. Basically, logic's approach include 1. Deductive reasoning. This reasoning approach is initiated by the generalization or conclusion followed by main points, and the last will be the supporting data, facts, examples, and evidences. It flows from the general idea to the specific or particular idea. Its construct is: all x are y. A is x, therefore, A is y. Example: all human beings are mortals. Pedro is a human being. Therefore, Pedro is mortal. 2. Inductive reasoning. This reasoning approach is from specific to general. The supporting data, facts, examples, and evidences come first, followed by the main points, and conclusion will be the last part. Its structure is: A is x and y, B is x and y, C is x. Therefore, C is y. Example: A is x and y. Maria is a Filipino and a strong-willed woman. Leonor is a Filipino and a strong-willed woman. Josefina is a Filipino. Therefore, Josefina is a strong-willed. The scientific process is another method advocated by analytic philosophy. This process has the following basic procedures. First, state the problem. Second, conduct background research. Third, formulate hypothesis. Fourth, testing the hypothesis. Fifth, analysis of data. 6. Conclusion. The methodic doubt, also known as Cartesian philosophy, was developed by French philosopher and mathematician René Descartes 1596-1650, known as the father of modern philosophy. The methodic doubt basically entails methodically, albeit tentatively, doubting everything in an effort to find certainty for certain, undeniable truths. Doubting leads to truth and wisdom. The solution provided by René Descartes to the epistemological query, "How can I know?" is to doubt everything. He thought that one can only find clarity after having doubts. René Descartes made an effort to prove philosophical truths that, in his opinion, could disprove even the most extreme skepticism or radical doubt by using the methodic doubt. Indeed, this approach seeks to guide us toward knowledge and wisdom. Descartes divided all knowledge into 3 categories: knowledge derived from tradition or authority, knowledge derived from experience or empirical knowledge, and knowledge derived from mathematics. What is methodic doubt? Propositions from each class are examined using the methodic doubt, which holds that if a means can be imagined to cast doubt on the veracity of any assertion, then all other statements in the class are also eliminated as dubious, but not necessarily wrong. René Descartes believed that by excluding all claims and categories of knowledge whose veracity can be questioned in any way, we will arrive at some unquestionable facts or certainties. Descartes therefore believed that experience is not a reliable source of knowledge. He explained that experience is deceptive because it is based on sensation. Additionally, since they can be deceptive, tradition and authority-based knowledge must be questioned. Traditions may just be cultural conventions, and no authority is perfect. Descartes felt that mathematical knowledge must also be questioned because, for all we know, 2 + 2 = 6, not 4, and we are only under the grip of an evil demon or a cunning god. Inference on methodic doubt. What then may we infer from the methodic doubt as a philosophical approach that results in wisdom and truth? The Cartesian method or philosophy teaches us to question everything until there is nothing left to question. The method involves educating us to be cautious and meticulous by teaching us not to accept knowledge that is questionable. The dialectical method is also known as Hegelian dialectics because it was proposed by German philosopher and influential member of German idealism Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel 1770-1831. Hegelian dialectic leads to truth and wisdom through the resolution of the contradiction between a thesis and its antithesis by the higher level of truth known as the synthesis. The 3 developmental phases, or the triad, that make up the Hegelian dialectic make this very clear. Initial phase is the thesis. This is a description of an initial thesis or idea statement. Second phase is the antithesis. This response undermines or refutes the argument. Third phase is the synthesis. It is a proposition that reconciles the discrepancies between the 2 points. In this case, the thesis and antithesis are combined to create a new assertion. We can take a typical child's personal growth in connection to his relationship with his parents as an example of this Hegelian dialectic method. We typically view our parents as the highest authority while we are young. But as we age, we begin to develop our adult identities, and the different changes we go through during puberty typically turn us into a troubled adolescent whose parents quit being in charge and, for some, even become a sort of an embarrassment. Our negative attitude toward our parents now lessens as we mature into young adults, and once we achieve complete freedom, our relationship with them even improves. In this example, the thesis is childish obedience, the antithesis is a form of adolescent rebellion, and finally the synthesis is independent adulthood with a good relationship with parents. This Hegelian dialectic has some real-world applications. Dialectics can, among other things, aid in the development of creativity. For example, a man might desire to sleep outside. This will be the thesis, but bugs would make that a terrible idea. This now is the antithesis. For the synthesis, man creates the mosquito net. Note that the synthesis itself becomes a thesis to which there is an antithesis, so the Hegelian method of dialectical unification ideally continues in many phases. Then, as the process progresses, the two are once more brought together and transcended in a higher synthesis. The dialectical approach results in a linear progression from less sophisticated viewpoints to ones that are subsequently more complex. Immanuel Kant, a significant German philosopher during the Age of Enlightenment, introduced the critical method. This philosophical method is also known as Kant's transcendental idealism. It contends that in order to truly comprehend something, we must first analyze its circumstances and boundaries. According to Kant, the senses provide the basis for human knowledge, but the need and universality of that knowledge stem from the very character and constitution of the mind, which is the knower of everything in the world. The proper philosophical approach, according to Kant, is not to ponder the nature of the world around us but rather to evaluate our mental faculties by examining what we can know, outlining the boundaries of knowledge, and determining how the thought processes that underlie our knowledge of the world affect it. According to the critical method, instead of speculating about the cosmos in a metaphysical way, we should explore our mental capacities in order to find the answers to our philosophical problems. According to Kant, the mind actively shapes our sense of reality. It is not merely a passive absorber. Idealists are individuals who believe that, rather than physical objects, the world is primarily composed of mental ideas. But Kant is different from most idealists in that he does not assert that concepts are more fundamental than things or that they do not have an external reality. The only reality we shall ever know, according to Kant, is the reality of phenomena, since we are unable to overcome the restrictions and context imposed by our brains. The critical method or Kant's transcendental idealism teaches us that reason, while useful, must be carefully regulated to prevent accepting ideas impulsively without sufficient proof. The approach teaches us that reason must be applied analytically in order to avoid being misled and that it is not an unqualified good. The critical method allows us to distinguish between issues that reason can answer and those that it cannot. This approach teaches us to let go of things we don't actually need, such customs and artificial religious practices that are pointless or unnecessary for good behavior. In summary, the following are the significant concepts of the lesson. Methods of philosophizing are processes introduced by philosophers to facilitate philosophical problems. When utilized, they lead to truth and wisdom. The Socratic method is an instructional dialogue of questioning that expresses itself in the critical analysis and cross-examination of each participant's positions. Husserl's phenomenological method is the exploration of the essence or nature of our conscious experience. The analytic method of philosophizing is concerned more on the utilization of logic and intellectual discourse, rather than the subject itself. Descartes' methodic doubt utilizes a methodic skepticism in order to find certainty for certain, obvious truths. Hegel's dialectic reconciles the conflict between a thesis and its antithesis through the higher degree of truth known as the synthesis. Kant's critical method contends that examining the context and boundaries of something is very significant in order to fully understand it. Once again, this is Owen, saying Mabu Hai. Continue to seek for the truth and wisdom and be a blessing.